And if all goes well, then we will be live. Let's see. It might show on yours before it shows on mine.
It's showing on ours.
Perfect. Okay, then I will just wait a moment or two before I get started, just in case people are slow to get on.
Yuko, where are you located? What city?
I'm in New York.
New York.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I apologize if I missed out everybody introducing themselves. I think I was like a minute too late.
Tamiko and Kiku and I are in Seattle, and Sarah and Mario are in Los Angeles.
Oh my gosh, am I the only East Coaster?
That's right.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for hanging out with me in this a normal New York City time.
Okay, I'm going to just start, since it looks like we have some viewers and everything is working as it should. So thank you for joining us for the first EPL Pop Culture Panel Series. This panel focuses on Japanese American voices in graphic novels and is part of One Book One San Diego. I'm your host, Jessica Buck, Adult Services Librarian here at the Escondido Public Library. The One Book One San Diego choice is They Called Us Enemy by George Takei, Justin Eisner, Stephen Scott, and Harmony Becker. They Called Us Enemy is a memoir that tells the story of George, known for his groundbreaking role as, I think it's Sergeant. Is he Sergeant Sulu? I'm not sure if I remember that. Mr. Sulu on Star Trek, as well as his activism for social justice and his family's imprisonment in 2 different internment camps during World War II. The books by our panelists all share common threads with They Called Us Enemy, threads of belonging, acceptance, the idea of home and finding one's place and identity. While all of our panelists are Japanese Americans, that does not mean that they share the same lived experiences and ideas. The panelists today have unique perspectives on the topics we will be discussing. And the last 15 minutes will be dedicated to questions from the audience, followed by closing questions. And I want all the viewers to know that those who ask questions will be entered to win one of 6 copies of They Called Us Enemy. So we have 6 of these to give away. So make sure that while you're listening, you think of some questions and paste those into the Facebook comments. This panel is sponsored by the Friends of the Escondido Public Library and in partnership with Mysterious Galaxy Bookstore. And books by Yuko Ota will come with signed book plates. Just make sure that you add it in the order comments that you attended the event when you're purchasing them on the Mysterious Galaxy's website. So now for our panelists. And I have your little introductions here, but I don't know, do you want to introduce yourselves? Now that I'm thinking about it, or do you want to read?
Oh, this is a lot of pressure.
I'm Frank Abe.
I mean, we can, oh, sorry. I was going to say we can do that, but you have to call on us because.
Yeah, call on us.
Okay.
No one is in the same order. No one is in the same order.
Okay, I'll go with my order. So Frank, you're first.
Produced and directed a PBS documentary on the largest organized resistance to incarceration, Conscience of the Constitution, American Book Award for biography of John Okada, working on a new anthology of camp literature for Penguin Classics.
See, I love that so much better than what I had prepared. Okay, so let's go with, let's see, how about you go? I'm gonna switch this up a little bit.
Oh my goodness. Oh, so much pressure. Hi, I'm Yuko Ota. I'm a Japanese American cartoonist. I've been working professionally for, I don't know, over a decade. I have won a Ignatz and a Reuben, and I'm a YALSA nominee, and I got at least 1 starred review from Publishers Weekly, and you can read the comic that I'm working on right now at johnnywander.com. It's called Barbarous.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, how about Mari, you're next.
Hi, I'm MariNaomi, and I am a Los Angeles-based
cartoonist from San Francisco. I've been making comics since 1997. My first published comic was 1998. My first book was 2011. And I've done a lot of graphic memoirs. I have a graphic novel series, a trilogy. The the last one just came out this year, and right before the pandemic. I managed to get in a launch party, and that was it. And I know it's good though. I'm saving a ton of money by not going on the book tour. And I also I run some databases. I run the Cartoonists of Color, Queer Cartoonists, and Disabled Cartoonist databases, which are free to use, and it's basically what it sounds like. Please go check them out.
Yay, thank you so much. Okay, Sarah, you're next.
I am Sarah Kuhn. I also live in LA, and I write books and comic books. The two main things I write about are Asian American superheroines and nerds in love. I am probably best known for the Heroine Complex series, which is about Asian American superheroines. I've also written a lot of comics and graphic novels. The latest is Shadow of the Batgirl, which is about Cassandra Cain, who's the Asian Batgirl. And I write also young adult rom-coms in the prose world. The next one is called From Little Tokyo with Love, and it comes out next year.
Ooh. Oh, so exciting. Okay, Kiku, you're next.
Hi, I'm Kiku Hughes. I'm a cartoonist in the Seattle area, and my first graphic novel, Displacement, just came out in August. It's about Japanese American incarceration. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, and Tamiko.
Hi, I'm Tamiko Nimura. I am a
Oh, I got it wrong. Sorry.
I'm a third generation Japanese American and Filipina American. I live in Tacoma, Washington, and I am working on a memoir, not a graphic one, but a memoir. And I am co-writing the graphic novel We Hereby Refuse with Frank Abe, who's on the panel today.
Awesome, thank you. That just was, I like hearing what you have to say about yourselves more than what I already had written. It's just, I don't know. I think it makes it a little bit more exciting. That's what I'm here for, to keep you guys on your toes. So, and we got that out of the way now, so all the nerves are gone. So welcome, thank you so much for joining me today. And I just want to remind people that weren't here at the beginning, that if you have any questions for the authors, to put those into the Facebook comments, and 6 of you will be chosen to win a free copy of the One Book, One San Diego pick, They Called Us Enemy. So really quickly, before we get into the questions, let's just start with, how are all of you doing in this crazy COVID quarantine world that we live in?
You have to call on at least the first.
How about you, Yuko?
No one wants
You're
to.
You're the one that's all the way far away.
I've been hanging in there. I've been doing surprisingly well. It did take me 4 hours to vote yesterday in the rain, and I was underdressed, but that's fine because I did it. So go vote if you're American. Please make sure you vote. That's all I got.
How about you, Sarah? I'm just gonna call on you guys now. How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm fine. My friend has started saying that he's pandemic fine, because I feel like whenever anyone asks you that question, it's sort of like, what is the response? I'm overwhelmed by my, existential crisis pretty much every day. So overall, I think, if you have shelter and food and you were able to vote, and, we all have like lovely projects we're working on, fine, but also still having the existential crisis. So we say we're pandemic fine.
Yeah, pandemic fine is definitely accurate. So Yuko's in New York, Sarah and Mari, you're in LA? Mm-hmm. And then I think the rest of you are
Seattle.
Washington,
Yeah.
Seattle, Tacoma.
Yeah, I'm in Tacoma. Frank and Kiku are in Seattle.
So how's Washington right now? I have a lot of family up there, so I always check the weather.
It's a beautiful sunny day today.
It's been raining nonstop. We stole all the rain.
Wow.
It's rain here.
So how have you been doing, Kiku, with everything?
Yeah, I mean, similar to what Sarah said, it's like fine for multiple global situations happening. You know, if it's not pandemic, it's the rise of fascism. But, you know, we take it day by day.
I had one beautiful, well, it's been a very stressful pandemic for me, as well as I'm sure lots of people. I think one of the hardest parts was when everything in California was set on fire. Well, basically the West Coast, that really sucked. Especially it happened right after I put a down payment on the house. While we were in escrow, a fire was inching towards this house.
No.
But it's mostly contained, and we're about to move in on Sunday. I'm in the closet in this new house. My favorite story from the pandemic so far is when I was raking leaves outside this new house, trying to save a little money on landscapers, and I got attacked by a bunch of wasps. And I didn't think about the pandemic for 2 whole days. It was amazing.
Just normal wasps, though, right? Not killer wasps.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
I didn't know at the time. I've never been attacked by wasps before. They were yellow jackets. It was very painful.
Oh my gosh.
I had no idea.
I thought for a moment you meant wasps as in humans, like the human version of a wasp.
That was actually the
scarier.
beginning of the pandemic when everybody hated Asians.
When
I
the
had a
hate
little-
criming was up, yes.
That did cross my mind.
This took a turn. Sorry.
Oh man, I love it. Okay, now that we got some giggling in, let's start with our questions. I know, so basically tell us about your graphic novels and what inspired you to write these stories. And first up, Frank, if you want to start, then you and Tamiko can begin.
Okay, for this, we'll just take 5 minutes, folks. For this, because no one's seen this book yet, this is the first time it's been seen in public. Hasn't been published yet. For this purpose, we'll define Japanese America as that group. I knew this would happen. We'll define Japanese America as that group descended from immigrants to the US early in the last century, meaning that one shared experience in our families is that of wartime incarceration in American concentration camps. Tamiko and I are both Sansei, 3rd generation Japanese American, born after the camps. We both had fathers in the camps. Now, for most of our lifetimes, Jessica, you got to understand that our community's response to that mass injustice could be summed up in one of 2 words. Shikatekanai, Japanese for passive resignation in the face of injustice. Oh, we were just victims. Or go for broke, Hawaiian pidgin for go all out, the battle cry of a Nisei combat team of young men drawn from the camps. So it wasn't until 20 years ago, Jessica, that writers and filmmakers, myself included, broke through this kind of binary framework with the then unknown story of a 3rd response, which is that of protest and resistance. This is Frank Emmy, leader of an organized draft resistance at Heart Mountain. So the Win-Luke Asian Museum of Seattle got a grant to produce a graphic novel about camp resistance, hired 2 writers, 2 artists. We've produced a 174-page book coming out on February 9th that uses this graphic novel format to cover the entire arc of the camp experience, from the first arrests made by the FBI to the public demands for some kind of retaliation after Pearl Harbor, to the military's plans for mass eviction, to our own community's complicity in cooperating with that incarceration and eviction, to resettlement and redress and the many afterlives of incarceration. Our book traces these stories clearly enough so that teachers can use it in the classroom. The book will come with an educator's guide to help teachers connect the resistance then to the resistance now. Resistance now, as Kiku said, against the return of white nationalism, the rise of authoritarianism and fascism, and the political demonization of immigrants and asylum seekers. Equal protection under the Constitution was denied Japanese Americans in World War II, and our story takes us to the US Supreme Court. something very much on our minds today and likely to be the center of further dispute in 2021. This, again, is a way for teachers to connect a habeas corpus case against unjust imprisonment to a discussion of reforms of the Supreme Court today, where access to healthcare and women's privacy rights are at stake at this very moment. We tell this epic story through the eyes of three characters whom Tamiko will now introduce.
Okay. So Jessica, our book focuses on three characters who were all young adults at the time. This is Mitsuya Endo from Sacramento, who was a public employee who contested her dismissal simply for being Japanese as part of a class action lawsuit against the state of California. From there, she agreed to be named as a plaintiff in a lawsuit against the continued incarceration of Japanese Americans in a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, people have probably heard of the other Japanese American cases at the Supreme Court, which challenged the curfew and eviction at the time. And here they are on this page. The cases of Minoru Yatsui, Fred Korematsu, and Gordon Hirabayashi. Endo was the only one who prevailed at the High Court unanimously, and her victory led to the closure of the camps for everyone. Our second character, Jim Akutsu, resisted the draft from Minidoka. He'd tried to volunteer for the National Guard, but was turned down. When the government tried to draft the young men from camp, Akutsu resisted. He argued that he wasn't obligated to serve in the United States military because he was classified as an enemy alien. And incidentally, any teachers and librarians watching should know that Akutsu was the inspiration for John Okada's novel, No Boy. Finally, Hiroshi Kashiwagi refused to answer the so-called loyalty questionnaire and eventually renounced his US citizenship. As a no-no boy, the government segregated his family at Tule Lake. He was later ostracized from the Japanese American community, and he also happens to be my uncle. We also reframe the story of rebellion and renunciation at Tule Lake to show it was not disloyalty to the government, but the product of pride and fear. All three of our characters were born and raised in the United States and knew their constitutional rights. Taken together, their stories raise important conversations about what it means to be loyal, to resist, and to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Mari. Next.
Oh, I think you're on mute, Jessica.
Forgot I was through the phone. Okay, I was saying just thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, so next, let's hear from Kiku Hughes.
Yeah, hi. So my graphic novel, Displacement, it also is a story about Japanese American incarceration. Specifically, it's a story of a fictionalized teenage version of myself being pulled back in time to experience the camps alongside my grandmother, Ernestina, who was born in San Francisco and was taken to Topaz when she was 16. It's a story that is meant to tell a little bit more in depth about the camp experience and about the wide range of experiences that people had there and emotions and reactions to what was happening to them. But also it's really about intergenerational effects, the lasting effects of this kinds of mass community traumas and the sort of hidden ways that these acts of racist fear-mongering leave scars on a community and on the nation as a whole. So it's about intergenerational trauma and the power of remembering and recalling and reliving these experiences.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm just going to go along with who I see next. So Sarah, want to share with us about, you don't have to share about all of them. You can just share about your most recent one or favorite one, whatever you want to tell us.
Well, I mean, I think in general, my work is connected by a few things. I usually write about joy. I write about, Asian American women, usually, in our current times experiencing joy, because I think that's something that we just don't see enough in, fiction, whatever form that fiction takes. So with Heroine Complex, which is a prose series, it was mostly about writing the kinds of stories I enjoyed growing up, which were about, superheroes, like ladies shooting fire out of their hands and wearing ridiculous costumes and fighting against ridiculous things. And I had always loved those stories growing up. They were kind of an escape for me, a sign that there was sort of something bigger out there. There was another world beyond my hometown, which was very small and very white. And so I just wanted to write something that was like the things I enjoyed growing up, but had heroines with my face. Which was something that I did not see when I was growing up. So that was kind of the focus behind that. And it's just very ridiculous. There are things like, demons who look like cupcakes that they have to fight against. There's karaoke that's like supernatural karaoke. It's kind of things like that. And then with Batgirl, which is, a graphic novel, that is more about, finding a place where you belong, finding this, beautiful family that's maybe not a blood family, but that's people you meet along the way. And one thing that with that book that I am very proud of is the thing that we sort of added to canon, me and my artist, Nicole Gu, is we did actually add a Japanese American character. So Cassandra Cain, who's Batgirl, is Chinese American, she's mixed race. And we wanted her to have an Asian American mentor, because in the comics, her main mentors so far have been Barbara Gordon and Bruce Wayne. And we wanted her to have an older Asian American woman to look up to, because that's certainly been very important in my life and I think would be important in hers. So we created a character named Jackie, who is the classic Asian auntie. She wears very loud clothing. She wears socks with Adidas slides, and she owns a noodle shop, and she's always trying to feed Cassandra and give her wise life advice. So I'm very proud that we added that to the canon.
Yay, thank you for sharing that. Okay, now I have Mari.
I'm not sure which book I was chosen to be on this panel for, but so I'll just say that my first book was about my sex life, but but the next four, no, so I have 4 memoirs, and so, but I've always, even the graphic novels are based off of my lived experiences. I'm very interested in sharing my own experiences and also looking through other people's eyes. And I feel like the common theme throughout my work and throughout my life really just is compassion and learning to be better about it. And the graphic novel trilogy that I just came out with, or that just the 3rd one just came out, it's basically just a teen drama with these kids. One of the protagonists is a half Japanese gal like me. But the interesting to me part about the book is that each chapter is drawn and told from a different protagonist point of view, and each different point of view is illustrated in a different style. I mean, I did all the art, but I was trying to see like how would he see the world and how would she see the world. And so and throughout each chapter, their points of view change as they kind of mature, or their points of view change. For example, it starts out with this one kid who has a crush on the half Japanese girl, and she looks really kind of glamorous and exotic. And but then when you see herself from her own point of view, like she looks kind of dorky when she says something stupid, and she looks really cute when she puts on some makeup or whatever. Like it's constantly shifting, and I'm just like all my work is I'm just trying to understand the world really, and so that's just me working out my own issues, I guess.
Thank you. No, I think Turning Japanese was the one that I put on everything. But
that
I mean,
was
they're all great.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, that was a little more mature about my experiences working in Japanese hostess bars in my early 20s, trying to get in touch with the Japanese side of my culture, which I'd been pretty removed from growing up in a very white environment as a child, much like Sarah.
And Yuko.
Hey, I think on a lot of the stuff that we talked about, or the handouts, it discussed Our Cats Are More Famous Than Us, which is basically a journal comic, which is me and my partner as we are trying to figure out how to be adults. But I think I'd rather talk about Barbara.
Yeah.
This is probably the most self-indulgent thing I've ever done. It is about a half Japanese American. She has recently dropped out of wizard college and can't find a job because she never finished her wizard degree. My partner and I basically sat down and we made a big list of all the things that we really wanted to explore in narrative, and it turned into this series. It's basically this girl gets hired at a mysterious apartment building and winds up working with the Super, who is a gigantic monster man, who's this guy. But you can read it all for free at johnnywander.com. We just finished the 5th chapter, which is the end of the first book. And you can also pick up physical volumes also at our website, johnnywander.com. Click on the store.
Yes. And I'll just say it right now, since Yuko brought it up, that we're partnering with Mysterious Galaxy. So everyone that's watching can purchase books by the authors. From there, you can pre-order Frank and Tamiko's, now I'm blanking on the title. No, where is it?
We hereby refuse.
Yes, we hereby refuse.
It's right
I just
below
had
our
to
names.
scroll up. Oh yeah, and I did that so that I wouldn't
Yeah,
forget.
thank you.
And I forgot that I did that.
That's twice now, Jessica.
Oh my goodness. Don't you just love it when things are live? Okay. And now that we've heard a little bit about you, heard a little bit about your books, let's get into more of our questions. So all of your books include personal stories and personal history. They also deal with the question of belonging, home, and community. So the first part of this question is for Frank, Tamiko, and Kiku. So, like They Called Us Enemy, your graphic novels focus on the experiences of those in internment camps who were taken from everything that they knew. So how did you handle the idea of belonging and of home when your stories focus on those who were taken away from their homes? And then what does community and home mean to you personally?
I'll go first.
So,
I'll just say we didn't make this personal, Jessica. We focused on the subjects. Pearl Harbor showed us we didn't belong. President and Congress robbed us of our homes. And community is what we had here in Seattle in 1941. Community is what was destroyed by the mass eviction from the West Coast. Community is something that for Japanese Americans became twisted and distorted by being suspended in these camps for 3.5, 4 years, and further twisted by the betrayal of our community by our unelected and self-appointed leaders who went under the name of the Japanese American Citizens League. And that's a central theme in our novel. Right, Kiku? You're nodding, so thank you.
Yeah, I think sort of playing off of that, or what Frank just said, displacement is really about my attempt. It's more personal in that it's sort of about my attempt to rediscover this community that was completely lost in my family, specifically because my grandmother moved to New York after camp, was not able to move back to San Francisco. These areas, Japantowns throughout the West Coast were just completely split up, and a lot of people were never able to return there. So that sense of community was really kind of, obliterated by the camps. So in Displacement, it's very much a story about, my character feeling disconnected from Japanese culture and then sort of rediscovering her connection to Japanese American culture, specifically in the context of like carrying these scars that she didn't even realize that she had. Not speaking Japanese, started out, or I grew up thinking, oh, why don't I speak Japanese? I'm so frustrated that we were never taught, and sort of learned through research, the complicated reasons why Japanese wasn't passed on to later generations, for example. Yeah.
For very
Good.
simple
Just to-
reasons, it was suppressed. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
'Cause we burned all the photographs and letters and books after Pearl Harbor, and JACL discouraged teaching of Japanese in camp. And then after the war, we all wanted to fit in, be white, and suppress the Japanese part. Absolutely.
Just to pick up on that, I just wanted to add that one of the things that I think I was reminded of while writing this book was how creative and resourceful and strong our community was through that whole experience as well. Certainly to different degrees, people were affected, but I also was moved by the impulses for creativity during that experience. As far as what community and home is for me, it's Japanese American potluck, hands down. That's community and home to me.
Love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us. Okay, so the next question about the belonging, home, and community is for Sarah, Mari, and Yuko. So the three of you have written books that show your personal experiences, the stories you tell. Sarah, your books are fiction and feature characters that are working out where they belong and their identity, particularly in your book, I Love You, Mochi. And similarly, Mari, you're turning Japanese, and Yuko, our cats are more famous than us, but also barbarous too. Kind of deal with those, a little bit of figuring things out. So how did you handle the idea of belonging and community in your books? And I guess we'll start with Sarah, because that's who I have first.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that probably comes up the most in my YA novels, just because I think that's, even though it's obviously like a lifelong journey for most of us, I think that that is something that you're really having a lot of questions about at that age, like figuring out where you belong and why you feel like you don't belong in certain spaces and all of that. So in I Love You So Mochi, I wanted to tell this story that was sort of about how there are different ways to be both Japanese and Japanese American. A lot of times I think identities within the whole Asian American Pacific Islander diaspora are very flattened. Like it's sort of like this giant umbrella that actually represents a lot of different things and a lot of diversity within that. And even within being Japanese and Japanese American, I mean, all of us have certain common touchstones in our experiences, but we also have a lot of differences. And so that book is about, you know, a Japanese American girl who goes to Japan for the first time and meets her estranged grandparents and kind of finds out why they're estranged. And her parents are, her mom is a Japanese immigrant and her dad is a third generation Japanese American, because I thought it was sort of interesting to show, like, you know, even within this community, there are a lot of differences. There are a lot of, you know, things that are quite diverse, and those experiences are going to be different as well. You know, the mom and the dad have similarities, but they also have differences in their experiences, and so does their daughter. And then I think I tried to explore that in even a different way in From Little Tokyo with Love, which is the YA that's coming out next year, because that is about a mixed race Japanese American girl who has grown up in LA's Little Tokyo neighborhood, which is a very vibrant, beautiful neighborhood. And so it kind of gets into those ideas of community and how there are various reasons why sometimes she does not feel like she belongs in communities where that she is part of, which I think is another very diaspora experience. That's something that basically every Asian American person I talk to has some like touch point with that, even if it's not the same thing. So I wanted to sort of, I think that was something that I was scared to talk about for a long time, because my Asian American communities, particularly my Asian American arts communities, have been so important and so valuable. And I never wanted to say anything that was even maybe could be perceived as a little bit negative. But obviously within a community, it's made up of a lot of people. There's a lot of messiness. So I tried to really honestly explore what that messiness is like, because that is something that I had heard from a lot of different people. I had heard it from a lot of fellow mixed race people about, you know, how sometimes we don't feel like we fit in certain spaces, and how that is a source of conflict and pain, and sort of, you know, there's a lot that goes into that. It's very complicated. So those are kind of always things that I'm thinking about, the sort of different nuances in those really specific experiences, because I think that the more that we can kind of get out there that there is diversity even within these communities, even within the smaller communities in the diaspora, that just shows the range of experience. And I think, presents us as the full 3-dimensional community that we are.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Mari, you are next on my list.
So I feel like a lot of the books that I've done so far take place in my 20s or younger, when I was really searching for trying to figure out who I was, and certainly where I fit into everything. And it's funny now, I'm in my late 40s now, and I'm always wondering, like, why was I in such a rush? Like, why didn't I just kind of enjoy the mystery while I had it? Like now I know myself great. Now what? With Japanese, turning Japanese specifically, well, for the longest time after I had the jobs at the hostess bars in San Jose and in Tokyo, I really wanted to write about it because it was so weird. And I love comics that kind of showed me a different kind of culture. And it was kind of like a bar culture, kind of like a restaurant culture, and also like this weird mishmash of different cultural cultures, like with different kind of Asian men and women kind of serving them, but the women were always like the powerful ones. It was really weird. And I just, nobody knew what the heck a bar hostess was. They assumed that they were prostitutes, or I don't know, sex workers or whatever. And so I kind of wanted to tell people, like, hey, this is what I did, because I guess I was just tired of answering questions every time I told someone what I was, what I did. And I just like, this is really interesting. But for some reason, I just couldn't write an interesting story about what was happening. And at the same time, I wanted to, for many, many years, like after it happened, and for many years later, I wanted to write about finally learning how to speak Japanese in my 20s, and finally speaking to my grandparents and my whole side of the family without my mom's a translator. And that was like, it was very eye-opening. It was really traumatic, and it was really great on just so many emotions. And it wasn't until, I don't know, when did that book come out? 2015. So 5 years before that, 6 years before that, when it finally hit me that, wait, that's the same story. And as soon as that clicked in me, it became really easy to tell the story. And that's what that book came out with. But I definitely had this feeling growing up that this, even though these were my friends, all these little white girls, these were my friends, and this is my community, I always felt like I wasn't, like, this wasn't really my community. The Japanese are my real community. I just don't understand their language yet. But once I figure it out, like, it's gonna be good. And it wasn't that easy, unfortunately. And that's what I was trying to kind of get across with turning Japanese. But I feel like a large part of that, like, I thought the big hurdle was the language, but truly it was the culture gap, the generation gap, like all that, just my stupid young brain gap. There was a lot to learn. And I guess I'm never really trying to pass along a lesson or anything when I tell a story. I just want to kind of show people my side of the story, and then they can make of it what they will. And I love hearing people kind of coming up with ideas of what the story's about and then telling me, because sometimes they're right and I just didn't know until then.
Mari, I grew up in San Jose. Which hostess bar did you work in? Was it in Japantown?
Well, no, it was actually it was on the peninsula.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
I can tell you offline, but
okay. Yeah. Never. You got me curious now.
Okay, and Yuko. Do you want me to repeat the question?
No, I got it. I'm just like, I'm so enthralled. I have to read everybody's books now. I want to hear all these stories. I want to know about working in a hostess bar. That sounds so cool. Regarding belonging and community in my books. So our cats, oh my God, this is 7 years worth of comics. It's like 400 pages. This is, it's not really as much of a memoir as it is like a journal comic. It was like almost like a daily charm of life book that me and my partner were working on together, basically about our experiences, like leaving college, trying and mostly failing to be an adult and live in a home with a bunch of other people who are also trying and failing to become adults. And it's mostly jokes. And it does show a very diverse community of people because our friends are very diverse. Like I'm Japanese American, my partner is Indian American, and we live with like a diverse group of people. And like part of the way that me and my partner like we connected together was because we had this common ground of being first generation American and having this household where we were straddling Americanness and some flavor of Asianness, which actually has a lot of crossover, and the expectations of being a good American, but also a good member of a different community. Actually, I think that the more personal book that relates to this is this book called Wander that came out last year or the year before. It's a small collection of travel memoirs, largely the travel memoirs that I wrote while I was traveling in Japan with my Japanese father, who is from Osaka. And they're the most like personally honest, and they deal with me as I'm trying to sort out my feelings of being an outsider and isolation because I don't speak fluent Japanese. I speak pretty mediocre baby Japanese for toddlers. And like not being fully fluent when your family's like you don't speak your family's native language, but also like connection and validation and trying to not being able to pass as entirely one race or another, and the difficulties and I don't know, the things that you realize about yourself when dealing with that in the moment. And you can also pick it up on my website at johnnywater.com.
Plug it in. Okay, thank you so much. All of you kind of answer one of the questions I had further down. So that saves us some time, which I'm always happy about. But now I think we should talk a little bit about diversity in graphic novels as its own medium. And I want to know why did you choose graphic novels? And do you feel that there is space for representation in the graphic novel industry, or is it something that you had to kind of push your way through and kind of find your own space in? And what would you like to see more or less of? So that's a few different questions. So you can pick and choose if you want, or you can answer them all. Let's start. Yuko, we're going to start with you.
It's me again. Hello.
We'll start at the bottom.
Wow. I thought you got tired of me talking, but I'm just going to keep going. So for why graphic novels, I started making comics when I was in high school. When it came time for me to decide what I wanted to do for my career, I was like, well, animation is close. So I'm going to become an animator because I think that I could make a career out of that. And they have overlapping skill sets. So I went to school for animation and I decided I hated it. And one of the reasons why is because I found it kind of impersonal. You need a a large team of people working together to make a relatively small story for like the number of people who are working on it. And with graphic novels and comics, you can have a very small team of people and make a large story out of it. And I found that I was able to be more honest. I was allowed to be more expressive, and I didn't have to bend to the like desires of other people. I really like working either alone or with a very small group of people, and it wound up working really well for me. That isn't to say that animation isn't for everybody. I have a lot of fantastic friends who work in the animation business, and they're doing great and amazing things that I could never do. But regarding publishing, I feel like when I started out, and I mean, this is probably like 2010-ish, before it was more difficult to get diverse characters in front of publishers and in front of audiences. And that's one of the reasons why I wound up doing so much self-publishing. Like most of my comics have been self-published. A lot of them have been now either picked up by larger publishers, and now I'm like working with Abrams and Random House and stuff. But it was basically an incredible boon to be able to self-publish and have access to the internet, because it showed that there was a demand for like diverse voices, Asian American faces, and then after that, people you can bring those numbers to publishers and say, hey, this is my readership, this is how many units I've sold. Do you want some of this? Will you distribute this for me? And they will say yes. So that was something that I had the great fortune of being able to do. And now it seems like publishers are more receptive to like a greater variety of creators. I do wish that in the future that we could see a greater variety of diversity in publishing itself. And I would love to work with an editor someday who has like the same or a similar background as me, because I've never had that opportunity yet, but I hope someday soon. I'm going to pass on the torch to somebody else.
So now I'm going to ask Frank, because Frank, you've written books, you've worked on documentaries. So why this format? Why a graphic novel for these stories?
Well, first of all, Tamiko and I were hired, so we're working for on hire.
Okay.
But I come to it personally as leaning more on the novel side of the graphic novel format. I mean, a lot of people here are artists themselves, and our book is more focused on the story and the texture of the story. And I come to it, I think, as an aspiring screenwriter, that you look at, and Yuko, you mentioned the number of people going in animation. You know, a feature film, it makes millions of dollars, but you can do a storyboard for a film, which is in essence a graphic novel. And so that was my personal approach in coming to this, was in treating it as the movie of all these books that I knew had the stories in them. Michi Wegland's Years of Infamy, Dorothy Thomas's The Spoilage, all these books, you know, Peter Irons' Justice at War. We've taken the stories that are in those books and made them into drama. And so that's how we came at this. And so that's a different approach to the graphic novel as opposed to the artist / writer.
I came to graphic novels really because of my kids. I had taught a few Jean Young's work, American Born Chinese and Fun Home. And then Tiboy's most recent, The Best We Can Do, loved all of that and had read it, but found especially appealing for me, because we were hired again to write this, was that there's a particular intimacy, I think, that's possible with the graphic novel, that and especially with certain audiences, it just reaches people differently than, say, a straight prose work. So I think that's been the real reward and the real challenge of working on this. And I am primarily a word person, not an image person. So we have two great artists, Ross Ishikawa and Matt Sasaki, who are both Japanese American, who have really taken what we've given them and, as you can see in our draft pages, given them some new life. But I also wanted to shout out to our press, Chin Music Press, which is a Seattle press with national distribution. And they, I think, were pretty quick to partner with the Wing Luke Museum to bring this project to life. So certainly we didn't have to go through the kinds of hurdles, right, about sort of mainstream publishing, but I'm really grateful to them for bringing this project to where it is now.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Sarah, so you've done graphic novels, you've just done just regular books. So what drew you to graphic novels?
I mean, I'm like a lot of people who end up working in comics, I'm a lifelong comics fan. You know, I was raised on the X-Men and Archie and, like, I don't know, all the things you read when you're 12. So I had always loved comics, and I was still obsessed with them, you know, well into adulthood. And I think I had always wanted to write them, but I thought that I would probably have to wait a little while because I had spent a lot of time at the beginning of my career concentrating on prose. And, you know, being, you know, a bit stereotypically Asian, I was like, well, I have to learn how to do it like exactly right. Like I have to learn all the rules and everything. And then a friend of mine just asked me to pitch on something. It was a creator-owned project. It was called Fresh Romance. It was basically a romance comics anthology. And I was like, okay, sure. I don't know if I know how to do this, but I'll pitch. And so I did. And that ended up being my first comics project. And from there, it led to a bunch of other stuff. You know, I've mostly since then written licensed work. But I will say I was really lucky, kind of going to one of your other questions with the Cassandra Cain book, because I know that when I was asked to pitch on that line, it was a new line for DC Comics that was a YA focused line. So it was like, this is all different continuity. There's no barrier of entry. We're looking for new readers. We're looking for sort of younger readers who maybe aren't picking up the, you know, DCU like monthly floppies. And so they sent us this list of characters. They sent me and my agent this list of characters that are sort of like, these are the characters we're kind of looking for pitches on. And it was kind of like all the characters you would expect that, you know, we know from like TV and movies, especially like that Supergirl, Batgirl, Mara, Wonder Woman, like kind of all the big names. And I really wanted to pitch Cassandra Cain. And so my agent asked, can this Batgirl be any Batgirl or is it just Barbara Gordon? And I think this, you know, speaks to like any kind of marginalized writer's experience where I was like, they are not going to want a Cassandra Cain book. Like, she has not been Batgirl in years. She has not really been used that much in years. Like, she's kind of been on the sidelines. I feel like no one remembers this character except me. And so they were like, no, it can be whatever sparks the most imagination. So I did the Cassandra Cain pitch, and I did another pitch that was for one of the characters who's in Teen Titans. And I was like, that's the one they're gonna pick because that's the character that everybody knows. Like, they're like, yeah, Teen Titans. And so I was really surprised when they kept wanting to hear more about Cassandra. And again, at every step, I was like, they're not going to buy this. Like, this is like among these like Titan characters. And I think Cassandra should be a Titan character, but I still feel like maybe not as many people are, you know, as aware of her. I think if they want a Batgirl book, it's going to be a Barbara Gordon book. But they kept coming back with that one. And so it ended up, you know, obviously getting published. It's really awesome. And I think that, you know, in the YA world and the middle grade world, there is currently a bit more openness. Like, it is still hard. It is not easy by any means, but I think that some of the gatekeepers now are younger, are perhaps also of marginalized identities themselves. There are a lot of up and coming creators who have done a lot of great work in that space. So it was, I think with that particular line, it was just a little bit more open, and they were actually looking for, you know, diverse representation, diverse experiences, diverse authors. And so I find, like, when the book actually came out, I was talking with one of the head editors of that line, and I was like, yeah, I was just surprised you picked this one and not like the Teen Titans one. And she was like, why? Why would you think that? And I'm like, I just go into it thinking that they're not going to pick like the Asian book. Like that's just something that's sort of ingrained in my thinking from being in publishing for so long. And she was like, well, I was always going to pick that one because I could tell it was the one you wanted. I could tell it was the one you were passionate about. I could tell it was the one that actually spoke to you on a deeper level. So that was kind of like a nice thing to take away from that, you know, I think a lot of us have this like self-ingrained like self-rejection, and it's not coming out of nowhere. It's coming out of being rejected, and seeing, you know, our peers rejected as well. But she was like, you know, I think that is actually starting to change. I think that, you know, we did see that passion. We did want that. We did actually want, you know, diversity in our line. So that was really nice. And I think what I'd like to see in the future is just a continuation of that, you know, like all different experiences, all different kinds of stories, both on the creator-owned side and the licensed side. And my own sort of personal thing that I always talk about is I want to see more diversity in the characters who take on these iconic mantles, right? So it was like really important to me that Cassandra was Batgirl. Like she has not been Batgirl in a long time. And people have said like, oh, why didn't you just make her like some other code name? Why didn't you give her a new one? Why don't you do this or that? And I was like, because the name Batgirl still means something. That is something, that is a title and mantle that everyone knows. And it is important that we are able to see ourselves as these big iconic characters alongside the characters that we create, you know, like I've created my own Asian American superheroines. I still want to see an Asian American Batgirl. I still think that's important.
Awesome. Yeah, I love all of your stories. So I just want to keep seeing all of them and keep seeing all of them get published and keep seeing all of them available so that I can buy them and have them at the library so that other people can borrow them and read them and experience them. That's my hope. So Kiku, you're last, and this will be, I have the little advanced readers one. This is your first graphic novel, but you've had illustrations published and other things. So let me just repeat the question. So why did you choose this medium for your story? And what are your experiences just with getting it published? And what would you like to see or more of or less of in the graphic novel genre?
Yeah, so sort of going off of what Yuko said way at the beginning of this question, I was actually an English lit major, so I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do when I graduated college because they don't tell you what to do when you're an English lit major.
They don't.
But we can do everything. That's the point.
Yeah,
I'm serious.
But I did love to draw, and I saw so many web comics and independently funded comics, Kickstarter projects and things online when I was getting out of college. And I thought, you know, and among those comics, those web comics and those like self-published comics was so much more diverse than a lot of the things that I was seeing out of major publishers. And it really made it clear that comics was a really great medium for especially marginalized creators to get their voices seen by a lot of people, especially online. Because they're so accessible, you know, people can visually engage with things before they actually take the time to read them. It made people, you know, it gave opportunities to creators that weren't necessarily being picked up by major publishers. So that was sort of my first interest in comics. And in terms of displacement specifically, you know, I had been wanting to tell a story about my family's experiences in camp for a while, but I also found when I was sort of starting to research it, this book, Citizen 13660 by Mine Okubo, which is a visual illustrated diary that she kept while in Tanforan and Topaz. And it was published in, I think, 1946.
46.
Yeah, so basically right as soon as she exited camp, it was published, which was incredible because people were still not talking about camp at the time. And it's a very honest depiction of her experience. And it is basically a comic. It's an illustrated diary. So it really made me feel like comics was kind of ingrained in the history of telling these stories about camp, this very visual narrative history. So in that way, it felt pretty cool to make a comic and to contribute to that sort of visual history. And then finally, talking about diversity in comics. Again, what Yuko said is I totally agree with. I think, you know, it's one thing to have a diversity of authors and artists, which is great. You need that. But I think also on the editorial end, there's a lot of improvement that needs to be done. And that's a lot harder because I think there is a feeling, especially among younger marginalized artists who are being picked up by these major publishers, you know, they're giving you all this access and things, and that's great. But you kind of lose sight of the fact that this entire board of people that is approving your story is white. And, you know, that does create a lot of barriers about the kinds of stories that are out there by marginalized creators. You know, they want a specific kind of story that appeals to a largely white board of editors. So yeah, I think it's important when you're looking at stories as a consumer to really, you know, look at the names that on these stories by marginalized writers and sort of figure out, you know, what was the editorial decision, you know, how much are they investing in actual diversity on every level, I guess.
Absolutely.
Those are really good points.
I don't think we've heard from Mari yet, and you've done a lot. You've done quite a lot. So
Just
why?
Fine.
So why did you start choosing to do like the illustrations and having things as comics and graphic novels? And what have your experiences been with getting those published and just getting those out there for people to see?
So I wasn't really into comics until I was an adult. I always wanted to be a novelist. That was my goal since age 3, before I even knew how to write. I think it's because my father wanted to be a writer, so I wanted to be a writer. And I wrote some books that, thank goodness, never saw the light of day. I tried to get them published. And once I realized that the publishing industry is not the same thing as writing and being a writer, I realized, actually, I don't want to do this. This sucks. At the time, I also started a career of as a writer in video games, which I thought was so fun to do. Like, it was, you know, just basically a screenwriter. And around that same time, I found comics. I found underground comics, specifically this the punk rock woman cartoonist who were doing autobio, and I'd never seen anything like that. And I decided, well, this seems fun. I'll do this too. And that was my hobby for many, many years. And then suddenly the hobby kind of took off, and I've been being a video game writer and other things. Like, I've done a lot of different jobs. My main career was a video game writer. And when the comics kicked off, basically when I got my first book published, like the first book deal was in 2009, and I think it was published in 2010 or 11. I suddenly started getting all these job opportunities. I mean, you know, publishing books isn't going to make a living, but it's all the ancillary things that will make a living. And I hadn't really expected that. And so I was getting all these really low pay, but exciting jobs. And at the time, I'd just gotten married, and my husband also in video games. And we had this whole conversation. And I asked, you know, do you want to be married to a poor cartoonist or a fairly middle class video game person? And he's like, go with the comics. So I went with the comics, and so and now this is apparently what I do. You know, I'd still love to write novels. Apparently, I'm not very good at it anymore, just because I've been focusing on the comics. I started writing a novel, and I sent it to my agent, and he looked at it and he said, hey, this is really good. What would you think about this being a graphic novel? And that's when I knew that I'm stuck with this for life, I guess. But like, as far as the diversity question, I mean, I come from a background in video games, so I'm used to being the only non-male in a room and the only non-white person in a room. I mean, growing up, that was my life in Mill Valley, California. It was mostly white people. So I'm really used to this struggle, and I think maybe that's why I've stuck with it for so long. I think one of the saddest moments was when I had turning Japanese as a pitch, and the rejections were mostly because the book was too ethnic, and I ended up taking a lot of things out that I now think would have been amazing, like a lot of things about being, you know, mixed race that some people on Goodreads say, oh, I wish I'd seen more stuff about that struggle. Well, I had it, but I didn't, it was, you know, getting me rejected. So, so I took a lot of that stuff out. But I've sort of made it not my life's mission, but I've spent a lot, you know, thousands of hours specifically working to make publishing a more diverse place with the databases and just getting the word out there, because it's BS that there isn't diversity out there. It's just, and there are diverse editors, sometimes there are lots of people out there, but the people who are making the decision, tend to not be quite so diverse or open-minded, or that was the case. I think it's getting a lot better. I like to think that I'm helping make that better, as all of you are, just everyone who sticks with it. You know, you're making things better, even though it sucks. Sometimes getting the rejections and, you know, that uphill struggle, like, we're making a difference. So go us. But, you know, not just seeing representation, which I think is so important, you know, my own representation. Like, I want to see everything. I want to see all the voices that we haven't seen. It was really eye-opening. I was mentoring this guy who wants to make a graphic memoir, Russ Wooten. Hi, Russ, if you're watching. He is a quadriplegic and wanted to tell his story, but outside of the normal tropes of disability. What do you call it? Disability porn, or whatever. Basically, making it seem like, hey, look, I could do this too. And, you know, he wanted to show all of it. And I realized, wow, I've never read anything like that. And I'm like, why haven't I read anything like that? And that was actually the seed of why I started the Disabled Cartoonist Database, even though I'm not part of that group at the moment. I do think it's important. Like, that's definitely, you know, a group of people that people have ideas about, and I don't think the ideas are necessarily true, and, you know, stereotypes and stuff. And I would love to see more voices like that. As I get older, I get bored of seeing the same old stories and everything, and I want to see more voices, just because I don't want to be bored. I want to learn. I want to keep growing. So that's what I think about diversity.
No, I love it. And that's one of the reasons why through our author chats at the library, we've tried to get people from all genres, all experiences, because we don't want to just keep perpetuating the same ideas and the same things. We want people to have more experiences and to experience authors that they wouldn't have just chosen on their own. Sometimes people just like to stick and read the same thing over and over again. We want you to read some more different things. So we are a little bit over, and we have a lot of really great Facebook questions. Some of them we've kind of covered already in the questions that we've already asked. Really quickly, I just want to thank everyone who asked questions. So Rocco, Patricia, Molly, Gina, Tracy, let's see, Barry, Mitsu, thank you so much for asking those great questions and for entering to win a copy of the book. And so from all of these questions, this is a great question right here, and I lost it. Okay,
Mari, I got married in Mill Valley. Sorry. Well, Jessica was looking. While Jessica was looking at her question, I wanted to tell you, Mari, that I got married in Mill Valley. So I was laughing when you said that you grew up there.
Oh my God! Wow.
I know.
Okay. Beautiful. I just wasn't raised white kids there
Nope,
necessarily.
I hear you. I do.
So this is one of
Yeah.
the questions from Patricia. She said, I read at least one title from each of the writers and artists on today's panels, and am just
thanks,
so
Patricia.
in love with all of you and the dizzying array of stories, characters, and conflicts that they face. So her question is, as Japanese American writers / artists, how important is language, both visual and written, to your work? And since this is a Facebook question, I'm just going to leave it to whoever wants to answer.
I mean, there's nothing more important than language in my world. Because language is communication, and without communication, what's the point?
Yeah, and I touched on this a little bit earlier with the sort of the idea of, later generations' relationship to speaking Japanese specifically as a language, and sort of the loss of that language being a big part of, being Yonsei or Sansei. I actually chose not to translate the Japanese in Displacement. There are some Issei characters who are speaking Japanese, and I just kept it in hiragana kanji because it sort of represented to me that my characters disconnect from understanding what was happening, but also, I think it represents the diversity of what was happening there. There were people that were speaking Japanese, because that was their native language. That was the language that they felt most comfortable in. So, yeah, it's complicated.
Language is tricky. Like Kiku says, we chose to put no Japanese in, but put everything in English with italics, because the Nisei children would have understood their Japanese parents, rudimentary Japanese a little bit. I think, Patricia, the more important question, not important, but another question is authenticity of language. That in our historical works, it was important to recreate the language that a Nisei character, Jimakutsu, Mitsuya Endo, would use in those contexts, in those scenes. And so as a dramatic work, we had to really work to, I knew Jim Okutsu and Hiroshi Kashiwagi personally, and reading just Mitsuya Endo's interviews, trying to capture the rhythm of her language as a Nisei woman in the 1940s and how she would speak. So that was the trick of the language for us.
Okay, I'm going to choose. Oh.
No, I don't have to go on, but I can.
Like, are you gonna be all Asian about it, Yuko?
I'm extremely good at that. I mean, personally, I think first, I mean, ever since I was a little kid, I have been a visual, like, emotive, like visual, emotiving the, yeah. I've been a visual learner first. Showing things visually has been my first instinct more than writing. So it's writing, like anybody who writes prose is a wizard to me. Like, y'all are incredible. But it's really like showing emotion through image is really like, that's my bread and butter. That's the only thing that I do well in this life. So I got real lucky that I can be a professional cartoonist. So that's my personal language, and it is we're lucky that that is something that is so intrinsically human that it can transcend culture and language. And I feel very lucky to be able to be working in this space.
That's funny that you said prose writers are wizards, because I think artists are wizards.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, like vice versa.
I think, my job as the writer of a comic is like so much easier than the artist. Like, I can write a splash page in like 10 minutes, and then it takes, the artist how long to draw. Like, it's just, I recognize where the actual labor is being expended in comics. But I think that's also like one of the really cool things about it is, for me as someone who wrote a lot of prose before I wrote comics, it was so delightful to realize that I didn't need as many words, you know, like with Batgirl, Cassandra in the beginning is a largely silent character. I don't think she actually speaks a word until many pages in. And that's all part of, you know, her origin and how she's been raised and how she deals with language, which is really interesting. But what was nice was, you know, at first we had written this very, like, my editor and I had come up with this kind of very elaborate voiceover because we were like, oh, this character is being introduced to people for the first time. Like, they don't know her. They don't know why she's not talking. Like, we really need to kind of walk out where she is at every step of this. And she's narrating from kind of a place in the future where she has more language. And then when we saw the pages, I mean, Nicole, the artist, had done such a beautiful job at making that character's face so expressive and really getting it all in the image that I was like, we don't need all these words. Like, we can cut so much of that voiceover, and I always love cutting anything. So it was so exciting to be able to cut that because it was, the images were really telling the story. And I think one thing that's really nice about that is, you know, I have friends with little kids, like little Asian American girl kids, who can't really read yet, but they have read that book because they can follow the story in the images, and they can also make up their own story, which honestly sometimes is better than the one I came up with. So I think that also is why comics can be so much more accessible, especially to younger audiences. They can tell what the story is without needing all of the words.
Yeah, that's looking at a page and laying down the text and then just like completely omitting like speech bubbles and enormous swaths of dialogue because it becomes redundant. That's the best feeling. I love that.
I love a silent panel or a silent page.
I agree.
I think you're muted again, Jessica.
Oh no.
It's because I'm plugged into the phone so that you can hear the chirping noise, and I keep forgetting. So we are at the end. So I'm going to ask the closing questions. Thank you to everyone who submitted the Facebook questions. Sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but they were awesome. And I'll let the winners of the book know after we're done being live. I will message you if you want a copy of the book. So the closing questions is the question that I ask at the end of all of the author chats here at the library. Is what is your favorite library memory? And I feel bad, Yuko, because I asked you this last time. I'm gonna have to answer it again if you don't have to, if you don't want to. So what is your favorite library memory?
I have to think of another library memory.
It's okay, I'll ask you last. So let's start with Frank, because we haven't heard from Frank in a while.
Bookmobile in San Jose, California. That's it.
I like it, to the point.
Yeah.
Okay, how about Tamiko? How about your favorite library memory?
Mine was a librarian's daughter, so yay, libraries. But I'll say one of my very favorite memories, because I'm the niece of librarians as well, was doing a literary reading of my work with my uncle, Hiroshi Kashiwagi, at the San Francisco Presidio Branch Library, where my aunt was a librarian.
Oh, I love it. It's a family affair.
Basically, yes. We're huge readers in our family.
I love it. Okay, how about Mari? What is your favorite library memory?
I'm going to do two because one's really short.
It's okay. Frank was short, so you can do two.
One, sitting in the Mill Valley Public Library, and they had this one window that was right over the creek. And there's a little sitting nook right there, and it's not very comfortable, but it's so serene and peaceful. I'm sitting there reading a book, hearing the creek. So beautiful. My second favorite is it was a radar reading at the San Francisco Public Library, and I just gotten a new puppy, and she was asleep in a sling while I was reading. And then she decided to pee while I was doing my reading all over my dress. The end.
Oh, it's always a good story if there's a dog. Okay, how about Sarah? What is your favorite library memory?
Well, first of all, Mari, I would still like you to bring a puppy to every reading, even though that was maybe not the best experience. I mean, you still had a puppy, so I'm guessing it was still like a little bit good. But when I was growing up, I mean, the library in my little Oregon hometown was just the best place. It seemed so gigantic to me. I remember discovering the whole wall of sci-fi fantasy books. That was just like my haven. That was where I went all the time. And then as far as specific memories, I do remember that every summer for like elementary and middle school kids, they would have that like reading challenge where you got like a slip of paper that was kept at the library. You couldn't take it home with you. It was kept at the library, and you went and you filled out all the books you read. And if you read a certain amount of books, you won a personal pizza from the local pizza place. And, I was always such a voracious reader. I was so excited. And I think I remember that slip of paper, like it had like, I don't know, spots for 20 books or something. And I always blew so far past that. I was writing like on the back and on the side and like upside down. And then I would hand it back to them. And I think I was secretly hoping they would give me more pizza, which they never did. But I still always appreciated having that sort of challenge of like, I have to fill out this slip and I have to like turn it back in every time. And then at the end of the summer, I get my own pizza that I've earned by reading.
You deserve that second pizza.
Someday I'll get more pizza.
Give this woman some pizza. Okay, and what about you, Kiku? What is your favorite library memory?
Well, I have a very bad memory for long-term things, but I'm sure I had plenty of childhood memories that I treasure. But I actually, when I was first starting to sort of research for displacement, my girlfriend, who was a librarian, told me that you can access Ancestry.com records via the library computers. So I took my mom there to go look up her grandparents on Ancestry. And we were able to we were just sitting in the library computer looking through like immigration records, and we got to see like his draft card from World War I. And some documents related to when he was taken to camp. So it was very cool, and I could only experience it for free in a library.
Okay, you go.
Okay, so I shared I think my favorite library experience the last time I was interviewed here, so I'm not going to do that one. But I was a librarian's kid, so I spent a lot of my time in the library as a kid. And if you know anything about me, you know that I really like dragons. And I used to spend a lot of my time in the stacks going through the fantasy section trying to find like
Dragon books.
Dragons. Yeah, so I got my first like not safe for kids book because it was a fantasy novel, and I learned more than I should have as an 8-year-old. But
was it the Dragonlance series?
No, it was Dragon Riders of Pern.
Oh, okay.
Very
Yes.
explicit.
That was
I showed my mom the
awesome.
cover, and she's like, "Oh, fantasy, that looks cute." And like, what parents are gonna look inside of the book?
That was mine also when I was about the same age. And then later as an adult, I got in trouble because I talked about what that book taught me about world building through dragon sex on a panel where perhaps that was not meant to be the main topic. I just want to say that I didn't talk about it on this panel very much. But yes, that's a shared experience of reading dragon books much too young.
That was not what my story was supposed to be. That's an entirely different panel. What book did you read way too early that your parents were like, that looks like it's fine? My real story was that there was one point where my mom's library had a library sale where they were selling either it might have been a mix of donations and also books that they were phasing out. And being a dragon kid, I found this book that looked like it was cool. It was called Dragons of Eden by Carl Sagan. And I was like, a dragon book, I'm going to read this whole thing. And as it turns out, it's not about dragons. It is about like evolution and like how like species propagate and like live on Earth. And that actually lit a strange fire in me. And I almost went into scientific illustration when I was in college because I got so into animal biology as a result of that book. And it's all because of the library. Thanks, library. But also Dragon Rider Superb.
Oh man, I love it. I love it so much. Yeah, that's a separate panel. We'll talk about dragons.
You have to make another panel just for that topic.
Yeah, we dare you, Jessica.
Hey, I am all for it. I have done these author chats, have gotten off topic many times, and I've been totally okay with it. So I'm all for it. I'll add it to my list. Yeah, so so thank you again for joining us. Thank you so much to our panelists for being here, Oh, there's a kitty.
Sorry, he came here to yell.
For hanging out with us a little bit more time than we had thought. Thank you to all of our viewers for asking all your great questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to those. And I always forget to do this, but this time I'm not forgetting. So those that are watching, if you have a quick minute, I have pasted our event survey into the comments. It is only 3 questions, so it's super fast. Just letting us know how you enjoyed it. If you want the library to do more of these, just fill that out. And you can order books by the authors. You can pre-order We Hereby Refuse from Mysterious Galaxy Bookstore. That link is in the description of the live chat.
Thank you.
And Jessica, the unanswered questions, unasked questions, I'm happy to answer any questions on my personal Facebook page if any questions
Perfect.
want to be sent to me. So yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, they're pasted into the doc that you all have, and they're also just like in the Facebook comments.
Okay.
So yeah. So if you want to hear your questions answered by Frank, then you can go to his your website, your Facebook page, his Facebook page. Perfect. Awesome. And you can also, any books that we have by the authors that are available to check out via Libby and Overdrive, Hoopla, CloudLibrary. And we also just got ComicsPlus. So you can also see some of the books, graphic novels by the authors through ComicsPlus. And thank you again. We hope to see you here on Facebook for our next author event, a virtual author chat with mystery authors, Jennifer J. Chow and Abby Collette, on November 6th at 4 p.m. So thank you again for joining us, and thank you to my wonderful authors. Bye.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you very much.